Tommy Robinson has been jailed at Woolwich Crown Court for 18 months after admitting contempt of court.
I mean, he's effectively been jailed for repeating false allegations he made over the past 2 years that were in breach of a court injunction. For 2 years he didn't, and then he started repeating them in online interviews and in a film. He made a 90-minute film that was shown a number of times.
Is Tommy Robinson receiving special treatment or cruel punishment? While segregated at HMP Woodhill since November, Robinson has access to a laptop, 4 hours of phone calls daily, and 3 hours of exercise time, privileges far exceeding standard segregation protocols. Yet the High Court just deemed his case against segregation not arguable, despite Robinson claiming the isolation is destroying my mind. This contradiction sits at the heart of one of Britain's most divisive cases, and today's verdict has massive implications I need to break down for you.
He believes the public has the right to have all the truth, not just what's provided by the mainstream media. He was following his principles. He passionately believes in free speech, he said, freedom of the press, and his overwhelming desire is to expose the truth. The judge said that the breaches were not accidental, negligent, or merely reckless. They were deliberate, direct, and flagrant.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. What's really going on behind the walls of HMP Woodhill? Today's High Court ruling on Tommy Robinson's prison conditions reveals a judicial system grappling with an extraordinary situation, one that raises profound questions about how we treat controversial figures in our prisons. The High Court has just delivered a decisive blow to Robinson's legal challenge against the Ministry of Justice. Mr. Justice Chamberlain didn't mince words, declaring Robinson's case not arguable and making a crucial distinction that cuts to the heart of the controversy. According to the judge, it's simply not accurate to characterize Robinson's segregation as solitary confinement, a classification that carries significant legal and moral weight. Since November 1, 2023, Robinson has been kept away from the general prison population at HMP Woodhill. Why? The government's explanation centers on security. Prison intelligence reportedly indicated Robinson had a mark on his head and, more alarmingly, would be killed by a lifer if placed on a regular wing.
This is a message to each of you who are thinking about the 26th of October. Maybe you're worried, maybe you're scared. Maybe you think you might lose your job, maybe you think you might get put in prison. Let's send a message to the world, to Keir Starmer especially, that the fight is not gone, okay? Not in us anyway. I am travelling back to the UK for literally the fight of my life. Men right now are fighting for their lives in prison, who have been falsely imprisoned, unlawfully imprisoned, pressured and forced and blackmailed to plead guilty to crimes they haven't committed. All of this will come up in our documentary, which will premiere on the 26th of October.
It's the kind of dramatic claim that raises eyebrows. Is Robinson genuinely at risk, or is this convenient justification for isolating a politically inconvenient prisoner? The contrast between the government's protective rationale and Robinson's allegations of political persecution creates a tension that lies at the core of this case. Robinson's supporters ask a reasonable question. Why would authorities keep someone in segregation for what amounts to a relatively minor civil offense? The ministry's response is that Robinson would be targeted by other prisoners seeking kudos and notoriety, suggesting his high profile makes him uniquely vulnerable. But here's where the case takes an unusual turn. Robinson's segregation arrangements hardly reflect the harsh isolation one might expect. Court documents reveal a surprisingly extensive list of privileges: access to a laptop, the ability to send and receive hundreds of emails, 4 hours of social phone calls daily, and 3 hours in the gym. These conditions are described as substantially more permissive than standard segregation protocols, a detail that complicates simple narratives about his treatment. Do these privileges represent special treatment, or are they necessary accommodations for a high-profile prisoner facing unusual circumstances? The answer likely depends on your perspective on Robinson himself. What's clear is that his conditions raise questions about consistency in how segregation is implemented across the prison system.
For me, behind bars, the way I was treated, I was taken to a prison with quite a low Muslim population. What I'm known for is criticising Islam, so there's been many planned attempts to murder me and kill me in this country. Not seeing or speaking to anybody, and they used the reason that I was in danger. Now, they would have had risk assessments before I went there. I was purposely taken to be put in danger so that then that reason can be used to then put me on solitary confinement. And it took months before I got the opportunity to go before a judge. Once the judge heard what had happened in the trial, we found so many illegal and wrongdoings within this kangaroo court.
Despite these relatively generous allowances, Robinson's barrister, Alistair Williamson, painted a troubling picture of his client's mental state. The court heard that Robinson has experienced an evident decline in his psychological well-being. In Robinson's own words, "The solitary confinement is destroying my mind." He's expressed fears about leaving prison mentally broken, claims that suggest segregation, even with privileges, carries a heavy psychological toll. The ministry counters that Robinson's detention conditions, while isolating, don't amount to total solitary confinement and are subject to regular review. Mr. Justice Chamberlain appears to have accepted this argument, concluding that the regime doesn't violate Robinson's human rights. It's a legalistic distinction that may satisfy the court, but does little to address the fundamental question of whether extended segregation, regardless of what it's called, inevitably damages mental health. This ruling represents just one battle in Robinson's ongoing legal war. The critical next step comes on April 11, 2024, when his legal team will present their appeal against his contempt of court sentencing. This hearing potentially carries far greater significance than today's decision. With Robinson's scheduled release date of July 26th approaching, the April appeal may represent his final opportunity to secure an early release and avoid further time in segregation. Today's ruling forces us to confront difficult questions about how our prison system balances security with humane treatment. When does protection become punishment? At what point does segregation, even with privileges, constitute cruel treatment? And perhaps most troublingly, do certain prisoners receive different standards of justice based on their political profile? Robinson's case isn't isolated. Others in high-profile UK prison situations have raised similar concerns. Julian Assange's case particularly highlights the psychological impact of prolonged isolation, drawing parallels to what Robinson's legal team describes as his deteriorating mental state. The fundamental question extends beyond this individual. When does security cross into punishment? Prison reform advocates have suggested Robinson's treatment might reflect political motivations rather than authentic safety concerns. The contradiction between his reported isolation and his extensive privileges, numerous calls, visits, and technology access, further complicates this narrative. If the April 11th appeal fails, we're looking at a precedent that could affect how the justice system handles controversial political figures. The outcome won't just determine whether Robinson serves his full sentence until July, but potentially redefines the boundaries between protection and persecution in politically charged cases. This tension between security measures and potential rights violations represents a critical balancing act that impacts our entire understanding of justice in the modern political landscape.